everyone, and welcome to the December 2nd edition of the Decaturish.com Twitch show. I am your host, editor, and publisher, Dan Wisenhunt. I hope you all had a wonderful and safe and socially distanced Thanksgiving. I know I did. Our guests today are Daniel Blackman, who is the Democratic candidate for the Georgia Public Service Commission. Daniel, how are you?
I'm good, man. I'm still sweating Georgia's UMass shirt. So
Well, we're going to
had a
get to that very important topic in just a minute.
matter of fact, one of my favorite basketball players was Marcus Camby. So I'm gonna leave
I
that.
went to school with Marcus Camby.
Oh man. Here
Like,
we go.
yeah, for like to the degree he actually went to school. Like, we can talk about that later.
So our other guest today is Decaturish contributor George Cheedy. George, how are you?
I'm good. Nobody's shooting at me. I won't complain.
Every day's a good day. Derek Spransey with GeorgiaVoter.guide. Derek, how are you today, sir?
Doing good. Thanks for having me, Dan.
Derek is joining us. Margaret Arnett had to bow out due to a scheduling conflict, but Derek graciously agreed to step in and represent that organization. So the Public Service Commission candidate, Daniel Blackman, is a Democrat, is running to unseat incumbent Republican Public Service Commissioner Lauren Bubba McDonald in the January 5th runoff elections. McDonald, who holds the commission's District 4 seat, declined an invitation to appear on the show, citing other commitments. The Public Service Commission regulates utilities like Georgia Power. Blackman works as a policy advisor and previously worked as the Senior Vice President for Environmental Affairs and Sustainability with Capital Fortitude Business Advisors. He previously served as Georgia Political Director for the Bernie Sanders campaign. His opponent, McDonald, has a long career of public service. He was the state representative for 20 years before he was appointed to the Public Service Commission in 1998. He held that seat until 2002, and he was elected to the post again in 2008 and 2014. So my first question for you, Daniel, is your opponent has a pretty lengthy career of public service and seems to have no problem getting reelected every time he's up for reelection. So why are you a better choice than your opponent in this election?
Oh, that's easy. That's the first question. I mean,
Uh,
I honestly, I would say that just follow the receipts, follow the record. I think anything that you want to understand about the political history of Georgia, Mr. McDonald used to be a Democrat. He switched parties. He was elected. He has served in a direction that, in all honesty, has not really moved the needle for working families in Georgia. I think the Public Service Commission is so far under the radar that when we really think and consider the challenges that are faced with the Public Service Commission, we have to understand that these decisions impact our public health, our utility bills, and our kids' access to wireless broadband. So, look, anybody you vote for, anybody that's running for office, you should do your homework. And when you follow his voting record, when you realize that 85% of the money he's raised as a candidate have been raised from folks that are regulated by his decisions, I think integrity has to matter. So I would just say you put me and Mr. McDonald side by side, and the difference is clear. One guy has been in the community, with the community, on the ground with the community, and has worked across the aisle to make sure that the right things happen. The other guy has kind of been in a room where the utilities he regulates have become his friends. And I'm here to put people over profit. So I'm happy to be on the show.
well, thank you. What if you're elected? What would you say would be your top two or three priorities if you happen to be elected on January 5th?
Number one, I will be in Washington, D.C., regardless of the outcome of this election, meeting with the Biden-Harris administration to make sure that we have access to low-income heat and energy assistance. Energy assistance programs have been cut over the last 3 years with the Trump administration. We have seen the adverse impact of COVID-19. And what that means to our communities is low and moderate income families are struggling the most. There's a gentleman in Griffin, Georgia right now who's a diabetic. This gentleman, unfortunately, is in a position where his power has been out for over 78 days. And his insulin can only be cool because he goes to a local gas station every day and fills his cooler up with ice. If that doesn't bother you and break your heart, I don't know what does. So energy assistance programs for our most disenfranchised communities is my number one priority. Secondly, I'm a solar guy. I believe in renewable energy. I believe Georgia is poised to lead in the South as far as clean tech and renewable energy is concerned, but we need a workforce to develop that. When you look at a school like Georgia Tech, and those young men and women graduate from Georgia Tech, they usually take their degrees and go to Silicon Valley because the jobs are there and the paychecks are there. I want to work with our historically Black colleges and our community and technical colleges in Georgia, and I want to build out a workforce reflective of the kind of clean energy economy that we envision and we hope to see within the next 5 to 10 years. And then lastly, I want to make sure that we educate more people about the Public Service Commission. And George would attest to this. When you ask the average person what's about the Public Service Commission, their first question is, what is the Public Service Commission, or what does it do? I want to create a hub by combining our collective energy, building and bringing stakeholders together, building coalitions to create a 6-year plan on energy equity and education. I believe that the utility sector is unattractive because we've made it unattractive. I think we can have fun with it. I mean, look, we're on Twitch right now, and younger folks that are voters, that are climate activists, that are fighting so many battles, such as, racial equity, climate equity, social justice, social impact. I mean, we've got to start making this relatable. The same way how George Floyd said, "I can't breathe," and Eric Garner said, "I can't breathe." There are hundreds of thousands of young men and women in America, specifically in Black and brown communities, that can't breathe because of asthma. So we need to form those bridges between where we are as a society and where we are as it relates to policy, so that our younger generation can understand fundamentally why these conversations are of the utmost importance.
So if you're just joining us, this is the Decaturish.com Twitch show. Our guest today is Daniel Blackman. He's a candidate for Public Service Commission. If you're watching and you want to ask Daniel a question, go ahead and create yourself a Twitch account, give us a follow, and jump in our chats and ask, and we'll ask the candidate on your behalf. So we are going to talk about Plant Vogtle because I think we're going to spend some time on this one. So just to kind of recap for people who don't know, Georgia Power's project to expand Plant Vogtle, it's a nuclear power plant in Burke County, has seen significant delays and cost overruns. As a commissioner, what would you do to get this project under control?
I mean, first and foremost, it should have been capped a long time ago. Everybody who's a Georgia Power customer, including churches and schools, have something on their itemized bill called nuclear construction cost recovery. What that means is we're being taxed for a nuclear facility that's not even constructed yet, that's not online. It was supposed to be online in 2017. If you just do the math, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, when it's supposed to be done, we're 5 years behind schedule. This was initially a $14.5 billion project. It's now ballooned to a $29.6 billion project, which will easily get to $30 billion when you look at the setbacks due to COVID. So I think that, the only way we can change it, number one, is offer some relief by not allowing the utility companies to get a blank check another day. There's a quote that says it's hard to get a man to understand a thing when his salary depends on him not understanding it. And we have too many commissioners that currently serve on the Public Service Commission who are making a 6-figure salary, 6-year term, and they're taking money from the people that they were elected to regulate. Now, let's be honest. There's no worse way to trust the system when you have a utility company that's shareholder driven, and you have a Public Service Commission, a 5-person commission that's tasked to make sure that we have fair and equitable policies and decisions as it relates to the energy we generate. So when you look at Plant Vogtle, which, by the way, just to be very clear, Democrats and Republicans voted for Plant Vogtle in 2009. So I'm not blaming Republicans. I'm not just blaming Democrats. If you are an independent, if you're a libertarian, if you're a Democrat, if you're a Republican, you should be outraged, because this project has become one of the most fiscally irresponsible decisions in the history of the state of Georgia. There are better ways to do it if we're going to go in that direction, but it should not be done on the backs and the pocketbooks of ratepayers, no matter what county they live in or what party they represent. I think we need to focus fundamentally on capping the cost. Not another dime should come out, but then also on top of that, we should fundamentally rethink how this is going to be paid off and how we're going to rethink our investment into clean energy over the next decade. And I think that's something I would want to focus on immediately as soon as I'm elected to the Public Service Commission.
George, you want to weigh in?
Oh, yes, many questions. I think you're laying out the basics of Plant Vogtle pretty well.
Mm-hmm.
And this is an issue close to my heart because I spent about a year in Eastern North Carolina writing about massive grid issues related to a nuclear power plant that had stupid overruns. And so some
Yeah.
very poor people are paying a lot of money for their electricity because they're paying off
Was this
this
Duke
thing.
Energy?
I'm sorry. Oh, yes, it was Duke Energy.
Yeah,
It was Duke.
I'm familiar. I'm familiar with that.
So yeah, I was in Rocky Mountain. They're still paying stupid rates. It's now, even now, 15 years later, they've
Yep.
never been able to get out from underneath it.
That's right.
So, but I want to lay out and like sort of a comment that a friend of mine said as I was sort of talking about this. If you shut down the plant Vogel expansion plan, if you said like to hell with it, we're done, ratepayers would still be on the hook for the cost of everything that's happened so far.
100%.
Like, almost no way to get out from under it, or like, which is why they keep driving toward trying to get the thing done. It's this horrible sunk cost fallacy. And I'm wondering at what point, I mean, do we seek state law to make sure that something like this never happens again? Like, what are the big lessons learned here from your perspective so that we can establish policies that keep a problem like this from ever reoccurring?
Well, the problem is most people don't understand that Georgia and South Carolina were the only states in 30 years to have been approved for new nuclear construction. And again, I mean, this is not always the sexiest or, best conversation to have because people are just not interested in the nuclear regulatory process, right? But when they realize that they've paid tens of thousands of their own dollars that they could put towards their children's college education or on a down payment for a house, it puts it into perspective. What I believe is that you got to look at what happened in South Carolina. Let's be honest, South Carolina, which had the same project with the same manufacturers as we're using here in Georgia, and they went bankrupt. And here's what happened in South Carolina. There was a coalition built, an interfaith, Chamber of Commerce, grassroots organizers and elected officials. And they actually went to the South Carolina Attorney General and they pushed back. They actually sued. I mean, they took a legal route that I don't think we're there yet in Georgia. But I'm going to be honest with you, man. I mean, the only way to really consider what we can do in the state of Georgia as it relates to lessons learned is we've got to stop the bleeding. And the only way you do that is, Georgia Power and their shareholders have been profitable for the duration of this project. The CEO of Georgia Power has not taken a pay cut on his salary to put back into the pocketbooks of ratepayers. And I want to be very clear. I have no problem with Georgia Power being profitable. But when they make a mistake, whether it's 5 years behind schedule on a nuclear plant or $500 million in fees to clean up coal ash throughout Georgia, they need to be on the hook for it. We got to stop rolling those costs over. My email right now is full of people that say, Mr. Blackman, I've heard about your campaign. I'm a senior citizen on a fixed income. I can't afford any more rate increases or I'm going to have to cut back on my medication. I heard a lady when Georgia Power went before the Public Service Commission in 2019, this time last year, AGL, Atlanta Gas Light, and Georgia Power both raised their base rate. And there was a lady that almost brought me to tears. This lady said, I'm going to be honest with you. She said, you raise my rate, I'm raising my grandchild, and all the money I have to send her to college, I'm going to have to dip into her college savings to be able to keep up with my rate increases. Now, I don't know this lady's financial situation or whatever scenario, but George, when you ask me a question about lessons learned, my point is not to what other states have done and what things have happened. I point to the people who are suffering because they don't have the money in their pocket to continue to pay for a project that's $14.5 billion over budget.
So we have a question from. I'm sorry, George. Do you want to?
Oh, go.
Yeah, we have a question from a reader. If you just have a second, ATL writer would like to know, what does the average voter not know about this position?
Wow, that's beautiful. I think what the average voter doesn't know about this position is that your rates are increase. Your rate increases are attributed to 5 people in the state of Georgia that serve 6-year terms and make $120,000 a year. This is one of the most powerful positions in the state of Georgia. Let's be honest. The reason why people don't hear about the Public Service Commission is because it's one of the best kept secrets that regulates billions of dollars, and you make a whole lot of money by making decisions on behalf of a whole lot of people. 10.2 million people live in the state of Georgia. 1.9 million live at or below poverty. So for those individuals that are working families, I'm endorsed by the AFL-CIO. For working families that are out there that are struggling to keep their lights on, I think people need to know, when you get your bill in the mail, the average person gets their light bill, and here's what they do. They look at it, they pause, and they're pissed off because they're trying to figure out, why am I paying so much? But you know what they do? They pay it. If they don't pay it, their power gets disconnected. So the biggest things people don't know is, who do you go to when your utility bill is too high? Who do you go to when your kid doesn't have access to high-speed internet because wireless broadband investment around Georgia is not as comparable to areas in metro Atlanta? I think people need to know that 5 individuals make decisions for 10.2 million people. 2.6 million are Georgia Power customers. We're all impacted by utility regulation.
I'm glad you brought up internet, because that brings me into one of the questions. On your website, you said that one of your priorities is to bring high-speed broadband internet to all of Georgia's 159 counties. But the PSC on their website says they don't regulate the internet. What?
They don't.
So
They
how are
don't.
you going to change that?
Because see, this is the problem I have with elected officials. They get their titles and they go out and they know what the problems are, and they act like they can't. What my dad used to say, my dad was a United States Army Ranger. He said, you need to learn how to chew bubblegum and march, right? We can do more from the positions we're in. The Public Service Commission regulates companies like AT&T. We can drive the conversation on public and private investment. That's the problem. You have a Public Service Commission that's not working in unison with our legislative body. And people make all these excuses. I'm tired of it. I'm just tired of people saying that they're elected and they don't have a solution. They don't have an answer. We need to get with the telecommunications industry. We need to work to drive the FCC's $20 billion investment that they announced in February of this year. And we need to get off of our butts, get from behind those offices, because here's the thing. If you can take a trip from a utility company to go across the world because you want to, cater to their lobbyists, then you can get off your butt and you can go meet with these companies that are working specifically on internet broadband access. And here's the thing. Brian Kemp showed that it could be done this year. And I'm not a fan of Brian Kemp. I don't think he did enough, but he went to AT&T and he said there are a whole lot of kids in rural Georgia that are struggling right now because they don't have access to wireless broadband, and COVID-19 is going to set them behind. So you know what AT&T did, which has a strong relationship with the inner workings of the Public Service Commission? They deployed 500 mobile hotspots around the state of Georgia like that. And my problem is we keep finding excuses for, yes, does the Public Service Commission directly drive that? No, because it's not a regulated utility. However, the Public Service Commission does have influence on the companies that can expand broadband throughout Georgia. So we've got to work with our elected officials. We've got to go to DC if we need to go to DC. We need to find the money and bring it back and stop allowing people to say what they can or can't do without trying or getting off their butt and making the effort to make sure that these counties don't get left behind.
Can I get into the nitty gritty of that just a little bit?
Sure. Of course.
Your PSC regulates telecom. We could be talking about 5G. The question is whether or not you view 5G as wireless broadband. There's an open question about how, whether or not 5G is stable enough or good enough in order to. I think it probably is. But that's a question for you. Actually, is do you think pushing a 5G network into 159 counties solves the problem that we're talking about?
I think the technology is too new to answer that question. I think that technology is changing every day. I mean, look at what Elon Musk is doing with satellite technology now. I mean, I think that the next 3 years, a lot of people are saying 5, 7, 10 years out. I don't think that we have the luxury of that amount of time to wait. So what I would say to answer that question, George, is that what we can do is work with T-Mobile and Verizon and AT&T and other companies to expand basic broadband services. I drive throughout Georgia. My campaign team and I have been to almost 62 cities in the state of Georgia, 62. And in almost every city that I go, the further south I go and the further north I go, I lose my cellular connection. You got folks right now in Albany, Georgia. When you leave Dougherty County and you're trying to go down to Early County, Georgia, you're trying to go to Valdosta, and you can't even get first responder services on a call because your cell phone service don't work. So I think that it's a public health crisis when individuals can't have access to consistent broadband. You got senior citizens at home right now that are reliant on telemedicine and on getting their medication online, and they don't have access to these areas. We have to begin to take more of a leading role in making sure those conversations are being driven by that. So 5G, I have my questions about the repercussions of it. I think that it's very early. There's a lot of questions behind, how that technology will evolve over time, and is it good for our communities as a whole as far as expanding the telecom industry? We have to see, and I need to be able to see more information that can help us to support an argument for or against it.
Got it. I'm sorry, I don't mean to take over here, but I want to talk about solar.
Yeah.
And part of the reason I want to talk about solar is because I lost power for about 36 hours last month after a storm, a big storm that hit. I was one of the million people who lost power.
We had a lot of them up here on this part of the state, man. I had some folks that lost about 20, 25 hours.
Yeah, it's crazy. Part of the reason that happened the way it did, I think, is because the grid is weak. And I think the grid could be stronger if there was more solar implemented around the state. Solar isn't as dependent on the grid. At the very least, people with solar panel. I live in a place where I can't get solar. I live in a primeval forest. I will never have a solar panel on my house. But I recognize that if other people do, it helps me indirectly.
That's right.
But there are still some stumbling blocks in Georgia around the implementation of that. And one of them is net metering. I don't think the state has been nearly aggressive enough in terms of getting net metering, where you can put a solar panel up and feed the grid your excess power and essentially be compensated for it.
That's right.
They've got a pilot plan. They had 5,000 implementation, and it should be 50.
1,000 people are currently on it.
So how do we get from here to there? I want to hear about solar. Talk to me, please.
I mean, it's an information thing. One, we're not doing a good enough job marketing it. I mean, I remember during the Obama administration where there were tax credits going out for weatherizing homes. I remember the same thing happened at the end of the Obama administration and even into the Trump administration with the Department of Energy, where you had your tax credits if you got a Tesla or if you got an electric vehicle. We have to have those same incentives and programs, and we have to educate the community as it relates to that. I believe in solar. I believe in battery storage. There's so many technologies that we're not invested in. The question is why are we not invested? The question is, what is it the utility companies are doing that's keeping us so far away from it? And here's the thing, Georgia Power, up until about maybe 2013, so 7 years ago, Georgia Power had an integrated resources plan, which is their 20-year strategy that included no solar. They literally presented a plan for a 20-year period with not 1 ounce of solar in the mix. We had a problem with that. We worked hard, and to their credit, the Public Service Commission did work. A couple of the commissioners worked to make sure we positioned ourselves for it. We built a coalition. We actually had the Sierra Club, the Tea Party. We had a bunch of groups come together that would traditionally never come together, and we worked our butts off to make sure it happened. So to your question, we got to look at the elephant in the room, no pun intended, is that if you want a solar system on your home, George, you got to make sure you got $10,000 or $15,000 in the bank just to put a system on your home. The average person doesn't have that. The average renter is not even in a position where their landlord can go out and solarize their home to give them the incentives they need. So there are a couple of things. One, I like what Mayor Garcetti did, and my friend Matt Peterson, who is the former sustainability director in Los Angeles. They had an incentivized citywide program for landlords and for the construction industry on both commercial and residential to incentivize energy efficient buildings as well as solar. Net metering in Georgia is not where it needs to be because, quite frankly, we've passed these policies. Most people are not familiar with it, and it puts us in a position where most people that would maybe benefit from it are not accessing it. So we've got to change that by making sure the information is out there, but we also have to encourage more low and moderate income families to be able to be in that space. I believe in community solar. There's a group in Athens, Georgia, that escapes my name right now. I think it's Solarize Athens. But a couple of years ago, Solarize Athens led the effort in this conversation to make sure more people had access to solar by forming coalitions with grassroots organizations and the business community to make sure that they knew exactly how to position the community for the benefits of solar. So we have to educate, which is why I'm going to take the first 2 years of my 6-year term to make sure that we educate the community and we give them the tools and the incentives they need. This is going to start off with our churches and our communities, our civic organizations, because those are the ones that can deploy the information and deploy the resources the fastest. But we got to make sure they're educated to make sure that information is then disseminated amongst their congregations and their membership.
Derek, we haven't heard from you yet. How are you today? Do you have a question for the candidate?
I don't have a question, but I do want to just state something that for your viewers that I hope is pretty obvious from hearing Mr. Blackman speak, which is, for the January 5th runoff, we're seeing, a lot of interest in the Senate race, right? And obviously it's the big one that's getting a lot of national focus. And nationally, of course, it is very important, but I would say that the Public Service Commission probably has a much larger effect on people's day-to-day lives than either of the two senators that we've got in Georgia. And so, like Mr. Blackman is saying, regarding the rates that you pay and how that drives, energy poverty and things like that, that has a whole lot more to do with Georgians' daily lives than either of our two senators. And so I hope that folks will pay a lot of attention to the Public Service Commission race because it is incredibly important and should not be kind of viewed as a secondary race to the Senate, in my view.
Can I say something to what
Sure.
Derek just said? And I want to thank Derek for bringing that up because I want people to know we're not the third wheel on the car. We have the potential to become the first. Our party, our campaign has a chance to become the first statewide constitutional offices that Democrats have held in almost 20 years. This is an issue that motivates people on the ground. There are people that don't understand when you say that Biden and Harris need the Senate majority to change this country and to be effective. There are folks in rural Georgia, in coastal Georgia, in Raven County, in Lowndes County, in Columbus, Georgia, where I'm from, that don't understand how the Supreme Court directly affects their life. They don't understand how they're going to be able to touch Mr. Ossoff or Mr. Warnock when they're elected, when they have a question or a gripe about their health care. What we have to do is make sure that we understand that all politics is local. And to your point, Derek, this is an issue that touches all of us. I had a Republican group reach out to me 3 weeks ago, and they said, we need you to come speak at our breakfast. We're fiscally conservative Republicans. We believe in fairness and equity, and we're socially progressive in some sense, but we don't believe and support many of the ideologies of the Democratic Party or the two U.S. Senate candidates. But they said, but Daniel, what we understand is that Georgia Power is taking a whole lot of money out of our pocketbooks. Now, when you have Republicans, to Derek's point, saying that their pocketbooks are affected, when you got libertarians' pocketbooks affected, independents, you got folks that don't want to vote. I have people that have told me, I voted for the first time because my grandma's on a fixed income. And you know what? I'm tired of seeing her struggle when she should be enjoying the final years of her life. I've literally had people tell me those stories all over this state. These are issues that the Public Service Commission deals with that impact our community as a whole. So I'm not trying to be a car salesman or pitch to people. I want you to know pocketbook issues are on the ballot on January 5th. And in order for us to be able to address some of the challenges we face and keeping a couple of dollars in our pocket, we've got to make sure we show up at the polls because these elections matter and local and statewide candidates have a direct impact on your everyday life.
So if you're just joining us, this is the Decaturish.com Twitch show. I am your host, editor, and publisher, Dan Wisenhunt. Our guests today are Public Service Commission candidate Daniel Blackman, Decaturish contributor George Cheedy, and Derek Spronzi with GeorgiaVoter.guide. We do have one question from a reader. If you have any questions, Mr. Blackman's going to be with us for another 25 minutes or so. Create a Twitch account, give us a follow, and get into our chat log. A reader asks, why do voters not know more about this position seat when it affects every single one of us? And I'll be frank, I'm probably one of those voters. It's not something that I cover every day as a journalist. So tell me more.
You know what? The short answer is because, to my point earlier, when there are positions of power that have an overall impact on the community, there's some very, very powerful and wealthy people that are putting their interests ahead of what really is right. One of the conversations I'll share with you, I met with a woman who's a diehard Republican. She's a Trump supporting Republican. We met several years ago, and she said to me one day, she said, Dan, you know what I like about you? She said that when it comes to the community, she said, you don't see red or blue. That's how she said it. She said, you see people. And we both discussed it, and we talked about there should be a ratepayer bill of rights. And the reason why I bring that up to the viewer's question is we have to understand that in this country, most of us are in the position we're in because civics is just not as emphasized as it should be in grade school and in other aspects of our life. So we know about the governor and the president and the mayor, and that's why most of the time folks will vote at the top of the ticket, and then the lower you get, the further they'll drop off. Why? Because the positions that affect our bank accounts are the ones that we're the most locked out of, because in order for these utility companies to make the kind of profits they make, I don't think people understand when we're talking about nuclear plant Vogtle, that is a $30 billion project. Okay, $30 billion. That is a lot of money. We will be paying for Plant Vogtle for the next 60 years. Do you really think they want ratepayers to know that they're about to mortgage a nuclear construction that is going to take a tremendously large amount of money? Who do you think the utility companies and the public service commissioners want to know about a bill for $30 billion over a 60-year period? Right? That means your children and my children, your grandchildren and my grandchildren will be paying for a nuclear plant, a nuclear expansion for the next 60 years. Now, my thing is this, there's some very influential people in the utility industry that want to make sure that they continue to profit regardless of how regular people like those of us on this call feel about it. So to answer your question, I don't mean to be disingenuous, it's just that either you're at the table or you're on the menu. And a lot of us in the positions we're in are on the menu of some very influential individuals that are making a lot of money off our lack of understanding and knowing what's happening behind the curtain.
George,
Yeah, just a bit. Because every time I hear these numbers, my Georgia Tech acts up. So $30 billion, 10 million people in the state. So that's $3,000 per person. Over 60 years, which would make sense if the Plant Vogtle expansion would lower your electricity costs by $3,000 over the life of the loan. Only it's not. There's no way it will. And this goes to everything that we've been talking about. So the cost per kilowatt for solar energy has fallen, and it's probably going to keep falling. It's less expensive to use solar than it is to use a kilowatt of nuclear power. Even after it's done, I know how cheap nuclear power is, to generate, but it costs so darn much to build it out.
And I don't mean to cut you off, but not only build it out, but to store it. The nuclear, we're not even talking about the storage process and the ability to not have contamination, like how they found uranium in the well water of Monroe County, Georgia. I just want to add that into your point.
So here's one of the things that's driving the cost of Plant Vogtle up is that they can, and you touched on this, we don't have enough people who know how to build any of this stuff. We don't know how to, we don't have enough people who know how to implement solar. We don't have enough engineers to build Plant Vogtle. we have a human resources problem in the utilities sector in Georgia, which is shocking to me. Um, the PSC has a role to play in telling industry, you need to get more people into these jobs. You need to train them better. You need to do. So what do you do? Like, how do you get from here to there in order to get people trained in order to build out all of this infrastructure that we need?
It's the same thing I said earlier when the question was asked about the wireless broadband. Is that in your role and responsibility, right? Workforce development isn't under the job description of the Public Service Commission, but it is a role I'm going to take on. We can't keep saying we want an economy when we don't have the workforce to support the economy in which we desire to have. It just doesn't work like that. And I think that, for instance, one of the areas that we never talk about that resonates with a lot of Republicans that I've spoken to is cybersecurity. You know, what happens if our nuclear facilities are compromised? I mean, like, we really need to have those conversations. You know, a couple of years ago, Duke Energy, who you brought up earlier, George, they literally released a report that said they almost had to shut down their nuclear because Hurricane Michael had posed a threat to their actual facilities. We need to understand that cybersecurity center, that $100 million facility in Augusta, Georgia, we need to start making sure we can staff it. There are a lot of jobs in Georgia that are not filled because we do not have young people graduated from high school and college, even if it's vocational, that have the skill set to go into those jobs that are good paying jobs. So that's why I'm so adamant about making sure that our historically Black colleges and our community colleges and our technical colleges are brought into the fold. We have to begin to use those areas to actually cultivate and develop leadership and opportunities. So I personally believe that if we're going to address these issues, whether you want to be a nuclear engineer or you want to, like, for instance, labor, there are construction jobs in nuclear construction. There are construction jobs in solar manufacturing. And guess what? It's no surprise to anyone. It spurs the economy. Ask folks around the state of Georgia where solar manufacturing facilities are, like near Dalton, Georgia. Ask those folks if the solar manufacturing hasn't spurred their growth. Facebook actually scouted out Georgia because they wanted to build a state-of-the-art facility that was powered by solar. Why aren't we hearing about that? So we have to go into our schools. There's a school where I am in Forsyth County, Georgia, called the Alliance Academy. The Alliance Academy has several tracks, but one of those tracks is clean energy. So they're teaching kids from the 9th grade all the way to their senior year in high school about solar power and mechatronics. Mechatronics is actually the combination of engineering, science, math, and technology, but also with the ability to build and fly drones. They're looking at weather patterns. They're looking at solar. They're looking at, climate patterns. I mean, there's so many areas that go into it. So I think we need to rethink what workforce development really looks like. There's a group in Georgia called Skills USA, and they have a building competition every year in Georgia. Georgia Power is one of the biggest sponsors. We need to make sure that we're cultivating those kids in those areas to make sure that we're addressing the challenges, but also the opportunities. We need to go into areas like Burke County, which is in the shadow of Plant Vogtle. We've got to go into Juliet, Georgia, where their water is overwhelmingly contaminated because of Plant Scherer, where their drinking water has high levels of lead and mercury. We've got to go into those communities and start right there to repair and replenish and restore those communities. Burke County, Georgia, where a $30 billion project is the poorest county east of the Mississippi. I have a problem when folks are working hard at a nuclear facility, regardless of how you feel about nuclear power, solar. I'm not even making that argument right now. When people in Burke County, Georgia, are barely making enough money to get by, and they're in the shadow of 2 existing nuclear plants, Vogtle 1 and 2, but they're also in the shadow of Vogtle 3 and 4, which is costing Georgia taxpayers $30 billion. There is no reason why individuals in counties like Burke and in places like Waynesboro should struggle the way they're struggling economically.
So we have several reader questions that are pouring in, and I want to make sure we get to them.
That's a good thing, though, right?
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, people are paying attention.
Yeah, people are paying attention to this, so that's good. So first question: the PSC regulates telecommunications, does that include cable TV? If so, can you comment on the blackouts like the one that is currently happening on the TENGA owned TV stations like 11 Alive here in Atlanta, and how could you make those stop happening?
Well, I don't know about that one in particular, but the short answer is yes. And the matter of fact, the last legislative session, the EMC. So I have an EMC. You may have Georgia Power. I have an electric membership corporation. So before I answer this question about the cable, I want you to understand that the reason why Georgia Power is the way they are, and they're a monopoly. So they can get away with what they do because they're shareholder driven. So Georgia Power answers to the profitability that they have for their shareholders. If their shareholders don't make a profit, their shareholders are going to get them on the phone. It's going to be a problem. Well, I'm a part of a membership-driven electric company, which means that we have a little bit more flexibility and more of a say-so as members when you pay a utility bill into that space. So the EMCs earlier this year tried to squeeze a $25 million cable expansion bill into increasing utility rates. We were against that. We had to educate the legislative body around that. But so yes, there are aspects of the cable industry that is regulated by the Public Service Commission. And to be quite frank with you, I do not know enough about the current situation that was referenced. What I would like to do is, my email address is Daniel Blackman at danielforgeorgia.com. That's DANIEL BLACKMAN at Daniel for FOR and then Georgia spelled out.com. If you email me directly with that question, I will actually look into it, not this evening, but tomorrow, and I'll get a direct answer, because the issue you're talking about with 11 Alive, I'm not aware. I've not been given information about it, so I don't want to speak on it and speak out of turn. So
And
yeah, I'll leave
it's
it
news
here,
to me as
but
well,
it
or
is
I would
news.
jump in and add to it. Another question: is there anything that can be done to get the cable companies from bundling certain channels in sports to make cable more affordable for consumers?
That's more of a legislative and FCC type question. I mean, it's even with, for instance, one of the things that bothered me, not to pivot, but it's the cold calls. It's these marketing calls that happen, which the Public Service Commission has direct impact on those. But when it comes to like bundling cable and these other opportunities, that's an issue that is important when you talk about the United States Senate and you talk about your congressional delegation in Georgia. That's a question we have to deal with at a national level because of the FCC. So we've got to really think about how to target those areas at a larger scale. The utility industry, specifically cable and oil and gas, light and gas, they have armies of lobbyists that are trying to prevent the very question that was just asked, because they fundamentally understand that they've monopolized the industry, and it gives us limited access and limited choices, which is why everyone is shifting so fast towards streaming services. So I think we really need to just understand that we're in a very complex space, and the utility industry has had a grip on folks like you and I for a long time, and it starts to be dismantling by focusing on local races like this. So we've got to make sure, the same way you're asking me this question, I would encourage you to know who your congressional member is. And after the January 5th election, that's something you bring up to your U.S. senators that are going to Washington on your behalf, to make sure that we address these issues with the cable companies, to make sure we have fairness and balance across the board.
Another reader question. Looks like we're stuck with Vogel, so how best can we develop alternative energy sources simultaneously? Additionally, how would Mr. Blackman communicate with the Biden administration to further economic development based on alternative energy?
I love it. Who asked that question?
A person by the name of Mutant Bot Forever.
Mutant Bot Forever. I love your question. And here's the thing.
I don't think that's their real name, but
hey, look, it don't matter to me. The fact that that's their name, I'm gonna run with it. So look, I love that question, because there are a lot of people that said, why are you voting for Biden, Harris? Convince me to vote. Some of them was criminal justice reform. Some people said, hey, you know what? I don't like how Trump handled COVID, this, that, and the third. One of the main reasons I supported Biden, outside of the fact that we had to get Trump out of office for the policies or the lack thereof that affected our communities, is that Joe Biden announced that he would be spending $2 trillion over the next 4 to 6 years to fight climate change. 40% of that money he said would go towards environmental justice initiatives, predominantly in low and moderate income communities, which means we can expand renewable energy opportunities with the investments made, because we all know that the amount of emissions in our atmosphere directly have an impact, if you follow the science, on climate change. So one of the things I'm going to do in my first 100 days being elected is I'm going to be in DC as much as I can and as safe as I can during COVID, to make sure that we're holding the Biden-Harris administration to their commitment. We can no longer elect folks, and I'm a Democrat, so I want you to be very clear with what I'm saying. We can't keep electing individuals that are campaigning one way and governing another way. If they say that they're going to make a promise and a commitment when they're running for office and getting our votes, then you damn sure better believe that when they get in office, we should ask them where the money, the support, and the resources are as it relates to what we need in our communities. So I want to drive the investment and make sure that the funds are available from the Biden-Harris administration to support those initiatives. But I also want to be proactive. I come from the family office and investment space. I'm already speaking, not just as a candidate, but I was speaking as a private citizen over the last 6 months to make sure that energy investment around the country is being driven from the public and private sector, because I just think it's in the best interest of the investment companies around the country, not oil and gas, but investors around the country that have a vested interest in fighting climate change. We need to be able to find the investment dollars. If the government won't spend it, we got to go find the money. And that's why it's so important to elect someone like myself. I'm not going to sit on my hands if Governor Kemp says it's not available. We're going to go find the money. And right now, and let me say this too, I'm going to give Donald Trump some credit, because Cory Booker and Tim Scott out of South Carolina worked on what was called the Opportunity Zone Initiative, which was federal funds to designated areas to expand opportunities in economically disparate areas. So one thing I think would work to that is if rural Georgia is in if most of rural Georgia is in an opportunity zone, why not go to those areas, use federal money to invest into an area that can't be taxed for at least 10 years and drive the income? Because here's the thing, if you're a farmer in rural Georgia and Hurricane Michael affected you, then that means that you may have lost your blueberry crop, you may have lost your pecan crop. We don't want farmers that's been around for 30, 40, 50 years to have to shut down their land and sell it for cheap. Why not use federal programs and grants that are available now to spur and drive clean tech investment, agribusiness, and investment when it comes to solar and what's the word I'm looking for? And biofuels, looking at opportunities for those who are landowners in the state of Georgia. Well, sorry for the long answer, but
that's. I hope that answered your question, mutant bot forever. Atlanta Nix also has a question. Atlanta Nix asks, what, if anything, can the PSC do to help homeowners transition to solar energy? Beyond incentives to switch, how do you make it accessible to someone who isn't already versed in solar?
Well, that's a fight within itself. I'm sure George would agree with that. It's not just the public service commissioners, because I want people to understand the Public Service Commission is like a judicial body. They hear the rate cases presented from the utility companies, okay? So we don't really have an influence on what the utility company can or can't do. So the advantage of electing someone like me that's well versed in these different opportunities is making sure that we can go to the utility companies and explain to them what is in the best interest of the community. One of the reasons we're in the position we're in the state of Georgia is because, in my opinion, there's not enough women and minority-owned business participation at that level. So a lot of the ideas are from people that are already existing in the industry. We have to open up Georgia. We got to make sure people know, to your question, wherever we need to make an adjustment at, or whatever incentives we think make sense, we have to have public service commissioners that are willing to go and speak to the utility companies. But the problem is they don't do that. What they do is they sit back, they sit in the room, they get their directives and their instructions from these utility executives and these lobbyists, and then they just go rubber stamp whatever they want to do. So I'm willing to push back. I'm going to put people ahead of profits. I think the utility companies have every right to be profitable. every right to have an energy mix that is, safe and reliable and is able to be cut back on. But I don't think it should be done on the backs of ratepayers. And I think we need to put more consumer and ratepayer protections in place to oversee the process and make sure that these individuals are held accountable when they make mistakes and given credit when they do the right thing.
We just got another reader question. The reader asks, is there an opportunity to use our vast farmlands to install solar or wind and let the farmers be able to get tax breaks, like some type of a partnership between the PSC and agriculture departments?
1,000%, and that would take your agricultural commissioner, which is a down ballot election. That's why these elections matter. I think Gary Black is the current agricultural commissioner. You got to understand how these things work. To the landowners, I think it's White Oak Farms or something like that. I'll get it to you. And again, that email is Daniel Blackman at danielforgeorgia.com. Here's the thing. A public service commission, best case scenario, works with the legislative body, works with the congressional body, works with the agricultural commissioner, works with the governor, and creates the space where these conversations are driven and these partnerships are made. But because we don't have a proactive public service commission that believes in stakeholder development, that believes in bringing people to the table, what happens is time after time, you get people that are doing things in silos. And all of us on this call know that if you're a landowner and you need some solar expansion, or you need a solar opportunity, or biofuels, or wind opportunities, you have to have people come to the table that can bring solutions and not create more problems. So the only way for us to do that is to build coalitions now that can help us to grow in the future. And one of those things that I have to do, and I'm gonna be very transparent, one of the only ways I can do that, those of you that are asking me these questions right now, and those of you who are gonna be watching this in the future, when you see an individual like myself, Daniel Blackman, when I get elected to the Public Service Commission, when I say we're gonna go to bat for landowners around Georgia, I need you to show up. I need you to write letters. I need you to email. I need your voice. We can't just say what we want and not be willing to hold the elected officials accountable. And this is a 6-year term. I cannot stress enough. When we get this done, I am going to need the very people that elected me to make sure that they can hold me accountable and make sure I have the support I need when there are 4 other commissioners that can vote against everything I do. The way we outwit and the way we beat the utility industry and the Public Service Commission is by building coalitions around people that are going to do the right thing. And I am going to overwhelmingly be an advocate for landowners, farmers, and especially folks in the rural parts of our state that are just not getting the support they need.
Well, Mr. Blackman, according to your campaign manager, you have about 3 more minutes left with us. I do want to be respectful of your time. Are there any parting words, parting thoughts you want to leave us with before we let you go this evening?
My first parting words is I hope I get invited back because this is fun.
Yeah, we love having you. Please come back.
I mean, I'm coming back.
I think George would give that 2 thumbs up, but
nah, let's do it. But look, my parting words are this: we live in a society at this point where I want to be very direct about how I feel about this position. While I am appreciative of the opportunity to be the Democratic nominee for the Public Service Commission in the state of Georgia, one of the things that bothers me more than anything is the fact that there are people who are dealing with mental health illness, with anxiety, with depression, as a result of just not having economic stability in their lives, in their households, and in their families. It is of the utmost importance for all of you to understand the example I gave earlier about a diabetic in Griffin, Georgia, that has had no power for almost 78 days, who has no access to keeping his insulin cool so it's usable, except he goes to a local gas station to get ice and put into a cooler. I want you to understand that I'm not running because I want this on my resume. I'm running because I put a face with the low and moderate income family that's struggling to pay their bills. I put a face with the kid in South Georgia who has to go to Wendy's or McDonald's or Burger King to sit in the parking lot just to get their homework done. I see the faces of the senior citizens on a fixed income that have to choose between their medication and their light bill. So when you look at me, I hope and I pray you don't look at me as a elected official or as a politician. I hope you view me as a public servant that has taken the time to research what the hell he's talking about. At the end of the day, I'm not throwing these numbers out like darts because I just studied them before I jumped on this call. I studied them because I have a kid with asthma. I grew up with asthma, and I understand what the fossil fuel industry has done to our health, to our communities, and to the development of our infrastructure around Georgia and around our country. I'm a fighter, I'm an advocate, and I'm someone that is, if I don't have an answer, I'm going to find it. If I don't have a solution, you and I will make one. And at the end of the day, we've got to put integrity and responsibility back on the ballot. So thank you all. Thank you, Twitch World, for allowing me to be here. Thank you to this show, to Decaturish, all of y'all, man. I mean, it's been amazing, and I had a phenomenal time. I hope to come back, and I'm so proud and privileged, man, because this has been the most comfortable conversation I've had in a long time. So thank you.
We
Oh
do
well,
what we can.
thank you for being here. Daniel Blackman, everybody, candidate for the Georgia Public Service Commission. He will be on the ballot January 5th. Please vote on January 5th. I don't care who you vote for, just go vote. Vote by mail, vote by absentee. DecaturishVotes.com is your repository for all local election coverage here in the Decaturish world. So go to DecaturishVotes.com. It'll give you information about where to vote, how to get your ballot, all that fun stuff. We're going to be providing some more coverage here soon regarding the registration deadline, which I believe is December 7th. If you haven't registered,
Right.
please go ahead and register.
Early voting begins December 14th, and
December
an
14th.
election day is January the 5th. Please vote early, vote by mail. Just make sure you vote and you take people to the polls.
What I learned is interesting. What I learned that's interesting is if you get your absentee ballot, some of us requested ours and got them. You can drop those off in the drop boxes right now. So we requested our ballots, we got them.
I love it.
We plan to drop ours off pretty soon, even before early voting starts. So that's really cool. If you didn't know that fact, again, if you look up DeKalb County early voting drop boxes, or you Google it, you should be able to find that. You can also find that information at DecaturishVotes.com. We will be back next Wednesday. I have no idea who the guest will be. Of course, I never do. But we will be back next Wednesday at 6 o'clock. We hope you will join us. We hope you'll share this with your friends and, get educated. These are important. What all of these people said here today is absolutely correct. The local elections matter far more than the stuff that's at the top of the ticket, and they have more power to affect your daily life than senators and presidents do. So it's critical for your future, for your pocketbook, for your state of mind to get educated on these issues. So please do. I am Dan Wisenhunt, editor and publisher of Decaturish.com. We hope you enjoyed the show. We hope you have a great weekend, and we'll see you next Wednesday. Bye-bye, everybody.